Welcome to First In, Last Out, and Laughing Loudest, the podcast dedicated to leading from the front, the joy of the Lord, creating Christian culture, and God-glorifying dominion. Welcome back to First In, Last Out, Laughing Loudest. We left last week's episode on what was a thrilling cliffhanger. I am ever the master of drama. When we left, Martin Luther had just recently been given greater access to the scriptures than he had ever had before, as he was now tasked with teaching theology as a university professor. Luther's mentor had hoped that this was going to help Brother Martin sort out some of his spiritual anxieties, and it eventually did. But first, before we get to Luther's breakthrough, we are going to discuss the controversy that Luther was swept up in. Now, that controversy came to Wittenberg by the name of Johann Tetzel. To understand this controversy, we actually need to take a step back from Martin Luther, look back to the Pope, and understand his desire to rebuild Rome. Now, I'd mentioned that the last few centuries had seen some pretty serious corruption. Things had been rough for the papacy. A number of circumstances had led to the papacy residing in the south of France for a period of 70 years. And in their attempt to correct this deviation, they ended up with the embarrassing situation where they had three different popes, right? Each one of them claiming to be the true pope, and each one of them attempting to excommunicate one another. Side note here, I think you have some embarrassing things to sort out when it comes to their claim of their unbroken line of apostolic succession, right? They would claim to have authority because, Peter appointed his successor and the next successor after him, right, is all, this unbroken line of apostolic succession is what they claim for themselves. Now, although this papal schism would eventually be resolved, in this time, the city of Rome had fallen into disrepair. Now, that wasn't going to do. If Rome was to be the shining jewel to which all the world looked, it could not lie in shambles. And so they began some pretty ambitious projects to try to revitalize Rome. So artists were brought in, building projects were undertaken. Rome would recover her glory, but this would also be frightfully expensive. So by Martin Luther's day, St. Peter's Basilica was the next big project, and funding was being sought wherever it could be found. And that brings us now to our controversy, right? So the Pope needs to do a fundraiser. He wants money to build St. Peter's Basilica. Now, one of the great methods of raising funds is by selling positions within the church, right? So you take some wealthy man, he'll give you a large sum of money, and he gets a new bishopric. He gets to be a bishop over another area. So Albert, pardon me, Albert of Brandenburg, I think he was already bishop in a couple regions. He wanted another one, right? So this was going to expand his authority, expand his influence to another area, right? There was a lot of political power that came with having authority within the church. And, you can just buy yourself into a position of authority, right? It's not exactly the standards for testing elders and qualifications for elders laid out in 1 Timothy, but I digress. So to earn this money, so Albert wanted to buy this position, this third bishopric, and the Pope wanted money for St. Peter's. But now to earn this money, to pay the Pope, Albert was going to have indulgences sold in his territories, right? So where's the money actually going to come from? It's going to come from the people in Albert's regions. And so the Pope authorized Johann Tetzel to begin selling indulgences in Albert's territories, which is where Luther lived or nearby. So firstly, what is an indulgence? Well, if you remember on our last episode, we talked about how the Roman Catholic teaching of the treasury of merit was that there are, we called them extra godliness points. Extra godliness points, this merit, these, the good deeds of the saints, the extra blood that Christ shed, basically the extra merit that the saints didn't need, right? So they had so much merit accumulated in their lifetimes that they got to skip purgatory and go straight into heaven. But that extra merit doesn't go to waste. It gets placed in the treasury of merit in heaven and can be transferred from this treasury of merit at the discretion of the church and specifically the Pope. So an indulgence was basically a transfer of merit, right? An indulgence is you getting to take some of that merit from the treasury of merit, which functionally equated to time off purgatory, right? So if you are a Christian, as long as you have not committed any mortal sins, you're not going to go to hell, but you have committed venial sins. And so for those venial sins, even though you are saved, you are in a state of justification, when you die, you're still going to need to go to purgatory for purging, for a cleansing. And it's, the Roman Catholic Church in more recent years has tried to soften their teaching on purgatory. You hear some statements from people just really downplaying what it is. But if you go back and look at what was taught, there's quotes from the past, and it was very obviously, it was basically hell. It was like, hell, but just temporary for people to go and be purged by fire to get rid of this venial sin before they would be pure enough to enter heaven. So purging by fire is basically what purgatory was. And how much time you needed to spend in purgatory depended on how many of these venial sins that you had committed, how many of these venial sins were on your soul that you had not done your penances for. But so here's where indulgences come in, is if you will do what, there's different ways you could acquire an indulgence. I think that's functionally what's happening by going to visit these shrines. And we talked about how Luther was getting all this merit as he was visiting the holy sites and climbing the Scala Sancta and doing these things. So an indulgence is a transfer of merit. You're gaining some merit from that treasury of merit, which equated to time off purgatory, right? You get your sentence reduced. And so one of the things you could do to gain an indulgence was the giving of alms, right? You give money to the poor, or, drum roll, you give money to the church. Tetzel had authorization to offer indulgences in exchange for alms, right? So functionally, you give money, you get time off purgatory. That's a pretty good deal, right? It's like you think of this, like we save up for retirement these days. We save up for various things to make our lives better later. How about this one? It's like, okay, I need to save up so that I can give a good amount to the church for the time that I die. Maybe put that in your estate planning. It's like, okay, buy me as many indulgences as I can afford at the time that I die. I'm putting that in my will. And so, pretty good deal, right? Time off purgatory. Tetzel was offering plenary indulgences, right? So a plenary indulgence is not just a year or two off of your time in purgatory, but this was a full pardon, right? This basically resets the clock to zero, right? You are now as pure as a baby on the day of their baptism. Tetzel claimed that his indulgences could pardon someone. This is a little bit vile, content warning here. But he claimed they could pardon someone even if they had violated the Virgin Mary. It's like, whoa, okay. So the claims that he made for his indulgences were wild. Even if you'd committed the most heinous sins, it was your free pass, basically. You can just buy your way into heaven functionally. And good news, not only could you get one for yourself, you could buy an indulgence for your loved ones who had died and were already in purgatory. Right? So here's quotes from Tetzel. "Don't you hear the voices of your wailing dead parents? And others who say, 'Have mercy on me, because we are in severe punishment and pain. From this you could redeem us with a small alms.'" Right? Just a little bit of money, and you could free your loved ones from their suffering in purgatory. And so the famous catchphrase of Tetzel, right? "When a coin in the coffer clings, a soul from purgatory springs." So the preaching and claims of Tetzel caught the attention of Martin Luther. Luther, at this time, he had not yet had his big breakthrough, but repentance was really key to Luther's thinking at this time, and even Tetzel's claims actually went a little bit, not just a little bit, they went beyond what the church was officially teaching about indulgences. There's supposed to be repentance as part of it, true contrition as part of it. Luther didn't like the way Tetzel was presenting it because it was just sounding so transactional, right? You just pay your money and the indulgence is effective. It's like, by merit of the work done, by merit of the indulgence given, it is going to be effective for you. And that was not okay with Luther. So in response to Tetzel, Luther wrote his 95 Theses. Right, 95 Theses. Theses is plural for thesis. Right, these are his 95 theses. Theses. Not typically, if you're not familiar, a thesis statement or a thesis is a statement that you will then defend or prove, through the rest of your paper or whatever. Luther wrote his 95 Theses, which he wanted to then defend in scholarly debate. So on October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the church in Wittenberg. And this is the event that has commonly been credited as being that which sparked the Protestant Reformation. Now, Luther's theses were primarily about indulgences and the abuse of the indulgences. And actually, it was not an angry protest, right? He's talking about what he saw as a, going beyond what the church should be teaching. Maybe just a rogue preacher here who needs some correction. Luther was not trying to start a movement. He was actually still very Catholic at this point. He still believed in indulgences. He was actually just hoping for a debate which would bring a correction to what he saw as the abuse of the indulgences. Even with nailing his theses to the church door, right? You think of what that would look like today if somebody went and tried to nail something to the door, and it sounds like an angry protest, and put this, I'm nailing this to your church. That wasn't the case then either. The church door was like the community bulletin board, right? We have in maybe the most famous one in Altona, I think, is Roadside. If you want to put up a notice, you go put it on the board in Roadside, or there's the bulletin board in the mall, right? That's all Luther was doing. It was a common place to post something. He was hoping for a scholarly debate to bring a correction to the abuse of the indulgences, and just to prove that it really wasn't intended to spark a movement. He wrote them in Latin, right? A language known only by the scholars of the day, right? He was not hoping to divide the church. He was hoping to clean it up a little bit. In posting his theses, Luther was being a good Catholic. What happened, though, is that some of his students saw these theses, translated them into the language of the peoples, and then distributed them. Right, so the common people then saw these theses that Luther had written and intended for scholarly debate, and those theses really struck a nerve. There was a rising sentiment amongst the populace that the church cared more about money than it cared about people's souls. Luther's 86th thesis reads this: "Why does not the Pope, whose wealth is today greater than the wealth of the richest Crassus," some famous rich guy, I guess, "why does the Pope not build this Basilica of St. Peter with his own money rather than with the money of the poor believers?" Right? So to put that into modern terms, it would be like saying, like Luther saying, look, the Pope's got more money than Bill Gates. Why doesn't he use his own money to build this fancy church rather than fleecing the poor? Right? So the political situation, the unrest among the peasants, the shaky theology of the day all came together to create the perfect storm for Luther's 95 Theses. They were, like I mentioned, translated into German, and one of the inventions that's often credited as having been important to the Reformation, and considered even maybe the reason why some of the other proto-reformers didn't gain the traction that Luther did, is the invention of the printing press. Right? There was now the technology which enabled you to mass produce writings and distribute them. Right? You think of this, prior to the invention of the printing press, everything that you want to do has to be hand copied. Right? So if you have some writings and you want to get them out there, you got to sit down, pen in hand, lamp light on, and copy them out by hand and then distribute them. Well, that's a time-consuming process. And so the new invention of the Gutenberg press enabled Luther's writings to be copied quickly and distributed to the people. Right? That this new technology and the providence of God had a dramatic impact. And so it did not take long as these theses, these objections were copied and spread among the people. It didn't take long before the Pope began to hear of Luther's objections. Luther then entered debates with men like Johann Tetzel, with another Johann Eck, and kind of through these debates, Luther is being challenged on various elements of his theology. He was being challenged on different parts of his objections, and it was shaping him, right? He was challenged, and he'd go to the scriptures to consider these things and asking different questions, and that was starting to shape his perspective. You know what? I know I said that we were going to give you the conclusion to to last week's episode, but I'm already getting long on time here. So we are going to do another dramatic cliffhanger. I don't mind this because October is Reformation season, and I want to get you all excited for the Reformation all the way through. So we'll make this at least a 3-parter. Maybe I'll do a bait and switch on you again. And we'll break it off into more. So join us next time for what might be the exciting conclusion of our Reformation story. This is First In, Last Out, Laughing Loudest.
Whatever.
Welcome to the segment of the podcast where I talk about, you guessed it, whatever I feel like talking about. Now, I've said that this podcast is dedicated to leading from the front, creating Christian culture, and God-glorifying dominion. My topic for this segment today falls under the Creating Christian Culture heading. And what I want to talk about is art. Now, this is going to be fairly autobiographical, but I do promise this is going somewhere, so please stick with me. Now, I was a kid who grew up liking to draw. I was never terribly good at it. It never became my identity the way it did with some kids who had some better skills in this area. For one of my birthdays, I got a How to Draw Monster Trucks book. So that maybe gives you a sense of the level of artistic, my artistic endeavors. And I will confess as well, while I quite enjoyed that book, I will confess that most of the time I just traced the trucks through the paper. So if you ever discover any of my artwork, don't be too impressed by the quality of the monster trucks. There's a good chance I just traced it. Anyway, my enjoyment of drawing monster trucks aside, I always thought that art was kind of dumb. I remember being brought to our local art gallery once and seeing a whole bunch of things that looked to me like they could have been painted by my classmates. Now, that is to say, they didn't appear to require much skill. My thought has still been, if you walk through our art gallery in town, that it just looks like people are willing to consider anything art. There's a few sculptures there that are actually beautiful, that look like they required some skill, but a lot of it's just random. Things only got worse for me as I took an art class in high school. We were introduced to various art styles, I had the feeling that the whole thing was kind of just a sham. And what bothered me is that everything seemed to be entirely subjective, right? It didn't seem like there was any rules that they were following. Just anything could be art, right? So this painting was declared to be good because somebody said so, because somebody liked it, or because someone famous painted it and then later died. That's a very important part of becoming famous as an artist. You have to die, which is a little bit unfortunate if your goal is to make a living doing this. But it didn't really seem to matter if the artwork was actually beautiful. It didn't actually seem to matter if it took any real skill to create. My growing cynicism toward art only grew as we were given an assignment to research an artistic style and then paint a painting in that style with a write-up accompanying your painting. So, cynical, cheeky 15-year-old that I was, I discovered the artistic style known as minimalism. And yes, this is a real thing. I can remember seeing the paintings, and there'd be a floor-to-ceiling canvas, and someone just painted the whole thing orange. I actually looked up some more. There's one that sold for over $1 million where somebody took, it wasn't a canvas, but it was a mirror. And he painted the whole mirror red. It's just this great big red rectangle. Or you'd have this great big, wide, tall canvas, white canvas, and somebody just flicked their paintbrush once, leaving a little splatter of black paint right in the middle of it. Now, I thought this was so dumb, and so I tried a little experiment. And in hindsight, I've realized that what I did was to run a reductio ad absurdum. That is where you try to show that if somebody would to follow through on their own argument, they would run into an absurdity, right? So it's a reduction to the absurd, to reduce it to absurdity. The goal, when you do an argument like that, when you run a reductio on someone, is to help them realize the problem with their position and then rethink their premises, right? So, I mean, an example of this that I've done in the past is, with the whole transgenderism issue, is to say, if I identify as an elephant, does that make me an elephant, right? It's like, well, no. If if I got some floppy ears surgically attached to me, would that make me an elephant? Well, no. If I got a trunk surgically attached to me, would that make me an elephant? On and on you go, right? It's you're reducing the position to absurdity, like showing if you follow these premises that it results in something irrational, which helps somebody then see the problem with their position. That's the goal anyway in a reductio. Back to my grade 10 art class, deciding to use the style of minimalism, I literally handed in a blank sheet of paper. I did nothing to it at all. It was just totally blank. And I called it drawing a blank. Yeah, clever 15-year-old kid. And then my write-up that accompanied it, I argued that this was the epitome of minimalism. Right, this was the fullest embodiment of this idea, right? You can't get much more minimal than doing nothing at all. I also said that it very perfectly captured what was on my mind at the time as I was trying to think of what to do, and I just kept on drawing a blank. Now, if I was an art teacher and some cheeky 15-year-old handed in a blank canvas, I would give them a 0. Right, here's your grade. You did nothing. You don't get good marks for doing nothing. Or maybe hand it back to them and say, haha, very funny, now get to work. But in hindsight, I can actually see that my art teacher was in a bit of a tight spot. For I kind of had a point, right? If all art is subjective, as we'd been taught in art class, if a flick of a paintbrush at a canvas deserves the same respect, or at least deserves to be sold for the same amount of money or put in the same category as a masterpiece by Rembrandt, right? If there is no meaning or objectivity or beauty, objectivity, pardon me. If there is no meaning or objectivity or beauty as implied by much of this respected artwork that we had been shown, then who's to say that there's anything wrong with a blank canvas, right? By what standard, right? Who are you to say that my blank canvas isn't real art when you are the one who has said that this big floor-to-ceiling painting of the color red is real art? So, in hindsight, my teenage laziness and sarcasm accidentally stumbled into becoming a pretty clever trap. It's actually a pretty decent reductio. I'm kind of proud of myself in hindsight, not that it was intentional or serious or anything, or that I even really thought this all through. I was just making fun of it. But here's the trap, right? My teacher could fail me, and by the same token, admit that there is objectivity in art, and therefore that a large swath of respected artwork is trash. A lot of the things people respect in the art world are just trash. They don't deserve any respect. Some people who are considered great artists should not be considered great artists, which would then mean that my art teacher would have to kind of go back on quite a lot of what we'd been taught in art class. Or she could follow her own premises that she'd been operating with and give me a good mark. Well, this is what happened. She swallowed my reductio, and I got 100% on that assignment. Right? It was something. Oh, they didn't use proper grades. It was something, squishy, like Met Plus was like the top mark, or needs improvement, or room for improvement, or something. And I got Met Plus, like A plus, 100% on that assignment. Now, she was kind. I liked her as a teacher. I think she liked me as a student. And perhaps she just appreciated that I was engaging with these ideas, that I was actually thinking things through. I think for a lot of teachers, that's what you're hoping for with your students, is that they're actually going to be thinking about things. They're actually going to be engaging with things. And I was at least doing that. So maybe that's why she gave me a good mark. But I will say that whole experience, getting perfect marks for literally doing nothing, really only confirmed my cynicism toward the art world. Maybe she was just playing 3D chess with me and wanting me to arrive at this conclusion later on in life that what I'm about to argue with you now, who knows? But while it's made a fun story that I've enjoyed telling, blank sheets of paper should not get good marks in art class. I would argue canvases that are just painted the color red, canvases that look like children's scribbles with crayon should not sell for millions of dollars, but they do in this world. And so here's the point. I told you this was going somewhere. Culture is downstream from religion. Theology comes out of our fingertips in everything that we do, inevitably so, right? The foundations of our thinking will work themselves out in various ways. You can think of your worldview as the headwaters, right? Your worldview headwaters are going to affect everything else downstream. And so if you embrace a worldview which says there is no ultimate meaning, there is no true objective good, there is no God, therefore there is no real such thing as beauty, everything is subjective, well, what are the outworkings of that worldview going to look like? Well, I can give you some examples. That will look like Piero Manzoni's artistic work, Merda di Artista, which translates, and I'll filter this for you, which translates to artist's feces. I won't use the word that he did. This is a sculpture, I put that in scare quotes, you can't see me, a sculpture comprised of 90 tin cans containing, well, what you might have guessed from the title of the piece. Merda di Artista sold for 124,000 euros in 2007, if you believe Wikipedia. Now, there are worldview dimensions to this. If you reject God, If you reject the very concept of objective standards, be that for ethics, morality, or for things like beauty, that is going to play itself out in different ways, right? Rejecting God has you rejecting the very category of objective standards, whether that's in ethics, morality, or in beauty. But as Christians, we do have an objective standard. We have a God who is the very fountainhead of the true, the good, and the beautiful. God is an artist, and he has made objectively beautiful art. He has also given us the ability to recognize it. Right? As image bearers, we know the difference between what is beautiful and what is ugly. There's a reason that we have this sense of wonder at the beauty of creation, right? And not every scene evokes that feeling within us, right? We look very differently at a beautiful sunset than we do at a cow pie. So here, the fact that the art world has abandoned objective standards doesn't mean that Christians should give up on art, right? We are to imitate our Creator. Our God is an artist. He is beautiful in and of himself. He makes beautiful things. He's given us the ability to recognize beauty. Christians should imitate him in these ways, right? That we should also seek to make beautiful things. And so our artwork must reflect what we believe about God and the world. Let the Christians be the ones making truly beautiful paintings, which would reflect our worldview. Let that be just one more adornment of our doctrine. Let that work stand side by side with the art, quote unquote, that rejects God and rejects beauty altogether, and let the world see the difference, right? Let people see what comes from Christians who believe that there is objective beauty, right? Let them see what the Christian worldview actually produces. May God's people create Christian culture. This is first in, last out, laughing loudest. So in keeping with the theme of culture making and your theology coming out of your fingertips, right? This idea that what we believe will be manifested in a variety of ways downstream. My music recommendation for today's episode is going to be a full album. We'll focus on one song, but it's an album titled Glory to the Holy One. Now here's a summary taken from Ligonier's website. It says, Glory to the Holy One is a collection of beautiful new hymns written by Dr. Sproul, R.C. Sproul, wedded with soaring melodies written by award-winning composer Jeff Lippincott. This new project provides the church with an offering of that which is good, true, and beautiful in the Christian faith. So if you're following along on my last segment, this is what I was just arguing that Christians should do with art, right? Let our worldview come out and find expression in these different things, right? So I was saying we should do that with artwork and paintings and sculpture. They were aiming to do exactly that with music, right? To communicate the true, the good, and the beautiful, to let the Christian worldview find expression musically. And historically, Christians have done this well. So I think one of the best composers, the greatest composers of all time, was Johann Sebastian Bach. And I say this as somebody who is who is not classically trained. I will admit my own ignorance here. I could probably speak with a much greater knowledge of the topic, with a much greater mastery of the subject matter, if we were to stick in categories of rock and roll and heavy metal. So I'm not classically trained. I'm not claiming expertise in this area, but I have really come to appreciate some classical music. I find it really helpful for studying, and when it comes to the idea of tone and the tone of music fitting certain moods, fitting certain themes, I do find classical music certain types of classical music really can give you a sense of the holy. And this is true of a lot of Johann Sebastian Bach's work. So you may not know this, but at the bottom of every one of his pieces, there were two sets of initials. So JSB, Johann Sebastian Bach, and then he would write SDG, Soli Deo Gloria, to the glory of God alone, one of the 5 solas of the Reformation. And so I've come to appreciate some classical music, and what they were aiming to do with this album is exactly what I was saying we should do, right? Express the Christian faith, express the Christian worldview, let the tone also fit with the lyrics. That's one of my complaints about a lot of contemporary Christian music. So this is going to be a unique music recommendation, since I was actually able to find some commentary from R.C. Sproul himself about this particular song. So instead of just getting my comments and opinions, we have some comments from the lyricist himself telling us what he had in mind and how he was aiming, or how he was hoping that the music would be able to match what was being sung. So before we get to the song itself, here's a clip. This is the late Dr. R.C. Sproul communicating his idea for this song to the composer of the music, Jeff Lippincott.
The core theme of this hymn is going to be the beatific vision.
Okay.
When we go back to the Scottish Reformation, they looked ahead to the final glorification that every Christian experiences when we will see him as he is, which will change us forever.
Okay.
And so that's going to be the theme.
So it needs to be a positive, sort of major-esque, anthemic rise to the music, don't you think?
Right.
Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. 1 John 3, verse 2. So this is the theme of this song. They were self-consciously aiming to express musically what it might be like to see Christ face to face. And the reason it's called the Highland hymn is that he's really drawing from the perspective of some of the Scottish, I'm assuming the Covenanters, right? The Reformation in Scotland. So that's hence the Highlands there. So this is aiming to capture musically the day when you are brought into glory, the day when you are finally and eternally set free from your battle to sin, the day that you hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant," and you gaze upon your Savior, right? And John says, and as you do, you are made like him, right? There's this idea in Scripture, you become what you behold, right? And so that's part of why we're always aiming to behold the glory of God, right? With the eyes of faith as we study him, as we study his word. You become what you behold. We actually just read in Psalms in our family worship as well, that those who make idols become like them, right? They become mute and blind and dumb, having eyes that cannot see, ears that cannot hear, right? Those who worship them become like them. And the same is true for us with God, right? You become what you behold. We all beholding his glory, being transformed from one degree of glory to another. And that finds its culmination in what was referred to as the beatific vision, right? The day when we actually see Christ face to face. And that's what they're aiming to do in this song. That's a pretty lofty goal, to try to put that moment to music, but a very worthy one. And so let's give it a listen. I don't know about you, maybe this is just me, but I find those lyrics a little bit difficult to understand. Now, here's a challenge to every person who has ever given a young person grief because their lyrics and their music are difficult to follow. I challenge you tell me what was just sung in that first verse. Maybe you can. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I have an easier time understanding, heavy metal singers. Maybe that's just what I've trained myself in. I don't know. But I found those lyrics a little bit difficult. In case you did too, here's what the verse says. It says, above the mists of Highland hills, e'en far above the clear blue skies, the end of pain and earthly ills, when we shall see his eyes. That's beautiful, and just a beautiful picture of what's coming, right? Just looking forward to heaven, to seeing Christ face to face. And then here's Sproul commenting on the refrain.
Yeah. And let's think about that. The refrain, this is going to be the moment of unspeakable bliss for every believer. And from a Scottish perspective, it's going to be a time of worship, but a time of singing, music. Lutes are singing.
I think we're ready to do it like we mean it.
That's beautiful. There's the refrain. Lutes will sing, pipers play, when we see him face to face on that day. Now the second verse is, his face now hidden from our sight, concealed from every hidden gaze, in hearts made pure from sinful flight, is the bliss that will amaze. Right. So what's currently hidden from our sight, what we don't see now, one day when our hearts are made perfectly pure from sinful flight, right? They're not going to be going after temptation and lusts and all the challenges of living with the flesh. Seeing Christ face to face is the bliss that will amaze, the happiness that will bring us joy and wonder. And then the refrain again, lutes will sing, pipers play, when we see him face to face on that day. I love the way the brass, like the trumpets that come in, on the first line of the refrain. In the description, they talked about soaring melodies. I feel like that fits here. Okay, last interruption, and I'll let you finish the song. I'll front load this commentary. So here are the lyrics they're about to sing. It says, we know not yet what we will be in heaven's final blessed state, but we know now that we shall see our Lord at heaven's gate. Or it kind of just closes off, or it almost tries to trick you into thinking the song is ending here, where, the veil is still over our eyes. God hasn't seen fit to reveal everything about heaven. We don't know the fullness of what it's going to be. But we have this hope that we hang on to, that we cling to this fact that we know to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, to be at home with the Lord. Paul says, I would desire to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better, right? Far better than anything possible here on earth. And so it kind of almost fades out completely, and then swells back in with a key change and a crescendo, and more of those pipes that give it sort of the Celtic or the Highland sound. And then the words, the beatific glory view that now our souls still long to see will make us all at once anew and like him forever be. Right? So that again, the beatific vision, getting to see Christ face to face, that which our souls are longing for now, is going to transform us in an instant to be made like him, right, as we see him face to face. And then it finishes with a final, more dramatic refrain. All the instruments are in. It's crescendoing. It's building. I just encourage you, as you listen to the end of the song, just try to picture all of these things. Seeing Christ at the gate of heaven, being made like him forever, entering into the fullness of what all desire has foreshadowed in this life, as you now go further up and further in to be with the Lord forever. I love that song. It really moves me. I wish I had better words. I just have to kind of resort to cliches. So at least with the awareness that that's what I'm doing, I'll say the music, it transports me. Like it carries me somewhere, right? It really is beautiful music. I can just picture what's happening there. I feel like the music lifts your soul up to see Christ, to imagine the hope of heaven, right? To draw from the joy that is in your future if you are in Christ. It's just truly beautiful music. And while this one is my favorite song, really the whole album is like this. Another one of my favorites is actually in our church's hymnal, and that one's titled These Great Things. That one's a reflection on Romans 8 and the golden chain of redemption. And the refrain there is, what shall we say to these great things? Right? If God is for us, who can be against us? Now, this is one of the albums I've loved to turn on when I'm working on my sermons, particularly when I'm coming towards the end of the week. That's usually the point where I'm working on the gospel application section of my sermon. And so all of this music on this album being about the holiness of God, the presence of God, the grace of God, the glory of God, just self-consciously aiming to communicate the goodness, beauty, and truth of the Christian faith, just fits so well for that stage of sermon writing, especially. And actually the fact that the lyrics are difficult to understand actually makes it a little bit easier to have as background music while I'm working. Some songs I find just are distracting because you just want to listen to what's being said. But this works really well. So there's Highland Hymn off the album Glory to the Holy One. Lyrics by R.C. Sproul, music composed by Jeff Lippincott. Go check it out. And to YouTube, I remind you that this has been fair use. I'm commenting on the music. I'm not claiming it as my own. And then I'm encouraging my listeners to go and buy the music. Let us support great Christian art. Let us create and enjoy Christian culture. This has been First In, Last Out, Laughing Loudest. And that's going to do it for this episode of First In, Last Out, and Laughing Loudest. If this has been a blessing to you, I'd ask you to please like and subscribe to the show. Share it with someone else who might be blessed by it as well. Share it on your social media feed. And if you're looking for a church that believes the Word of God all the way down and all the way across, I encourage you to come check out Grace Covenant Church in Altona. Lord willing, see you back here again next time. God bless.